Recording from the great state of Oklahoma, as our guest's t-shirt says today. Welcome to the Restoration Group podcast, where we are sometimes silly, but always serious about investing in Oklahoma City leaders who desire to integrate their Christian faith into their business. I am your host, Clay Steves. Today, I'm joined by my co-host, Aaron Scott, and our dear guest, Alan George. Team, how we doing today? That's right, Alan George. Welcome.
Thanks for letting me hang out with you guys.
Absolutely, absolutely. Okay, so let's get a little formal bio here before we dive into the combo.
Alan really likes super formal things.
Okay, good. Well, I've got a real formal one here from online. So originally from India, born and raised in the Middle East, Alan now lives in Edmond, Oklahoma. I'm not giving the zip code, though. I'm not giving any zip codes. I'm not going to give any zip codes. In Oklahoma City with his wife, Meryl, and their 3 kids. Alan has been in ministry for 20 years and is passionate about reaching the world for Jesus Christ. Alan was on staff at Life.Church for almost 10 years, serving primarily as the church online pastor. Life.Church is based here in Oklahoma City and is a multi-site church that also founded the YouVersion Bible App. During his tenure at Life.Church, Life.Church Online, which Alan was leading, has grown its reach to be the largest church online ministry in the world. Alan strongly believes in leveraging technology and leveraging tech to make the truth of Christ accessible to all people groups, regardless of distance, language, and cultural barriers. He has extensive background in leadership development, team dynamics, and strategic thinking. He has traveled worldwide, preaching at churches, speaking at conferences, and connecting with pastors and leaders to expand their influence and leadership, shaping both online and in-person ministry and growing global teams. Alan, man, thanks for being with us today.
That bio needs to be shorter. I was like,
okay, let's cut and go again.
I just want the record to show that real time, I cut stuff out. So I just also want you to know that the full one is even longer than that. I cut stuff out. So you've made a transition in the last, I actually don't remember how long it's been, Alan, but into running your own business. And I know your clients are churches, but tell us about your business and what you are doing now.
Yeah, I currently work with pastors and churches that are trying to figure out digital ministry for their churches. And so I go in, help their teams. Some of those roles look like fractional roles to where I'd go step in as one of their team members and work through a particular season and then hand off to where they can take it on their own. It's interesting. It usually starts off with like digital ministry, but it always goes beyond that, which is what I love doing. So we talk about anything from leadership to culture to just spiritual formation to you name it. So it's just been a really fun experience.
That's cool. What led you? So maybe even just give us some of the background story that led to you. Again, you're doing ministry, even in the business place, the marketplace, but like, tell me what led to the transition from working full-time in ministry to doing it this way.
Yeah, I was not planning on leaving my role at Life.Church. No intention to do that. And it was a weird thing. So just for context, this is my first full-time ministry job. I've never worked at a church before. I came from corporate, always was involved in the church, had a heart for ministry, but never full-time. And so about 6 months after I joined the team at Life.Church, my wife joined the team as well. And so our whole family, my kids, we've all this is home for us. So the idea of leaving was not in the books until it was like a quiet voice. I don't know if it was audible or whatever, but it was I just felt inside like never before, hey, I've done what I've asked you to do. Your time here is done. And that, throughout the process, like we always tell ourselves, like my identity is not going to be in what I do. Who God tells me like all of that. Like, no, I felt like I was thinking the right way about it until you have to walk away from something. And so the thought of just like, well, what do I do now? And so even in that, there was no writing on the wall saying, I'm calling you to leave here and go to this. It was just, I'm calling you to leave. And so it was a complete, step of faith into uncertainty. And what's interesting is like, while I was in ministry, like say in my role at Life Church, obviously there's a lot of faith involved in it. This was kind of a different kind of faith. And so it was exciting, but nerve-wracking as heck. And so I took a step of faith, left, and it was a mutual friend, Kevin Penry, that said, "Hey, so what are you going to do?" And I was like, "I have no idea. I've been asking you what I think I should do, and you haven't been giving me an answer. So, like, are we going to get somewhere with this?" And he said, "Well, just, what do you enjoy doing?" And I talked about some of the things I enjoy doing, and we talked about the possibility of, would you be interested in helping a church with their digital stuff? And so a friend of mine reached out, and that conversation led to me beginning to help them from a consulting standpoint, which meant I had to go figure out LLC and all of that fun stuff too. So long version too, that's kind of how I got into it.
So when you made that transition though, like what were some of the things that you're like, okay, you said you went from like corporate to church, now back to corporate or business. Yep. Like, what are some of the things that you kind of knew to expect that would happen in that transition? And then maybe some things that you didn't.
So one of the things that I come from a sales and marketing background. And when I came into the church space, it's like, in a way it is sales and marketing, but you're not charging anyone for anything. And at Life Church, we gave everything away for free. And so I loved that space. I loved the ability to, as schedule permitted, if there were churches that reached out, I'd love the opportunity to talk to them. I mean, when COVID happened and our buildings all shut down, overnight, we had 30,000 churches sign up for the Church Online platform. And so just the idea of like, okay, how do we scale our reach with them and help them as we're like, all those things were fun. Now thinking into like, okay, stepping out of that situation and now like building a business, it's like, crap, I have to charge for stuff. I'm not against money. Like, I love money, but I'm just not used to.
Can that be the clip that we use when we post this episode?
That's easily. That's the reel money. Right there. There's the reel. Yeah. That's right.
Yeah. So the idea of now offering to help a pastor or a leader and saying it's tied to, this is how much it's going to cost you. That was, it felt like fish out of water. It was very different for me. And so there was this internal tension of like, you've got to put food on the table because we're going from a 2-income family to a 1-income family. And so I think just coming to terms with it was like thinking about it different and realizing like there is value that I have to offer and there's a cost associated with it, and that's okay. And there's nothing wrong with that. And in order to really give my best self to a team, I've got to make sure that things at home are taken care of, or else I'm going to be figuring out how do I support my family, and I won't be able to put my focus into it. So it's taken time. I wouldn't say that I've got there, but just trying to think through it from that lens was new. And that was an interesting journey for me.
It's really good.
How did you talk to me about the practical process you went through to actually land on your price points? And did you pick out Kevin? And then even in startup mode, Alan, did you slice the melon 20 different ways? Because you were in startup mode and different churches are different sizes and some are friends and family. Like, did you talk to me about that process? Because I think for an entrepreneur, that often is especially ones that are jumping out and maybe that side of it's new, or they didn't have that exposure at their previous role. That can be a big question. And we're even going through that restoration group. Like, what price points do we set? What is our value in the marketplace? Some people are saying that's crazy. And other people are like, oh, that's a drop of a dime. So how did you navigate that, knowing your clients are often churches? Like, how did you?
Yeah, I think the space. So I definitely had help throughout the way. Okay. It took a while for me to learn how to articulate what I did. I didn't have to articulate that for 10 years. For me, it was, I'm a pastor and I'm inviting you to experience Christ. It had less to do about what I could offer and more to do about what God wants to bring into your life and what you could encounter with God. Now, all of a sudden, I have to prove my worth to a team, and they need to know, what are they paying for and what are they getting in return? And we have to write contracts and all this kind of nonsense. And so in my mind, I'm going, and the other thing for me with what I do is if I was building a website, for example, there's a clear goal at the end and there's a product delivery that they're expecting, right? With me, it's I'm going to help you figure out what you need to do. So it was like a coach would be a good example, but you're the one on the field and you're the one with the ball and you're the one that's got to play. And I can tell you and share, here's what I've learned. Here's what I've learned from other coaches, other players. But end of the day, you're the one that needs to do what needs to be done. And so there's no like specific product. And so learning how to explain that as a deliverable, my goodness, I'm still learning how to do that. So I think those were some of the challenges, like practically, but I had help in terms of just trying to identify like, what can I do? So one of the things that I learned was, you can either work with 20 churches or you can work with 4 or 5. And which one do I want to be? And so just I would look at interactions that I had and go, what did I like out of that moment? What did I not like? What would I keep? What would I enjoy doing that just fuels me? What would I hate doing if I have to do it again? And so some of the things that I had to learn was I had a team of people. Now there's me, like that's the team. And so how do I do everything from start to scratch? And so there were some things that I outsourced and there were some things that I wanted to do because that gave me life. So learning how to identify what gives me energy, what doesn't, that was a part of the process as well.
That's really good.
And you were doing that real time with clients though. I mean, I think that's the part that I'm hearing is that there's no, like you buttoned it down perfect ahead of time. You're getting the best you can, but then you're beginning to activate into engagements and conversation. And I mean, am I hearing that right?
And to throw another layer on top of that, I didn't know if this is what I wanted to do.
That's the best part at the beginning that I heard you. You said you left and then it was like, okay, so what am I going to do? Right. Because your obedience step was the step away, not to step to something per se. Right.
Yeah. And I have a heart for churches. So the way I'm wired and personality, so I'm ESTJ, Enneagram 8, belief is a big part of my wiring. And so for me, I need to sink my teeth into something to be able to go after it. And a mutual friend of ours, I'm sure, has also told you the same thing. It's like the gift of uncertainty, this concept. I was like, what? Why?
The gift of unknowingness. Why? No, there's no gift of unknowingness. I want to know the answer.
I want to know the answer. Like, tell me exactly. And so this was a season where I would say even for about 2 years, it was, can I trust God and just do the right next thing or the next right thing, however you want to say that, without knowing the full picture? Because I like to build. I'm a builder. And so I want to know, what am I building towards? And here, there's no building towards anything. It's just unknown, like just, I don't know. And so I had to then really come to grips with, okay, what am I building towards? And I heard a quote, I'm probably butchering it. Dallas Willard talks about it. He said, the most important thing that God gets out of you is who you become.
Come on.
And it really challenged me because I am a doer and I love building things and I love working with teams and I love scaling, and that's all like very doing. But if the most important thing that God gets out of me is who I'm becoming, well, then if I feel uncertainty when it comes to what I'm doing, there's no uncertainty when it comes to who I need to become. And so that was also a shift of like,
it's good, Alan.
And I'm probably rambling, going all over the place. Like, for example, in my role at Life.Church, there were times, where we'd hit busy seasons, and I'd wish, man, I wish I had more time with the kids or with Meryl, or I wish I could be there for that birthday or anniversary. Now I have the time, and I'm the one, at times like in the pickup line with the rest of the moms or whoever's available, and I'm like. And Meryl's got a busy schedule, and she's like, hey, babe, can you take the kids to this doctor's appointment? I was like, sure, I have nothing going on. And so you go from this like really extremely, busy schedule where she was carrying the load of being present at home to where now it's switched, and to find joy in it and to not feel like I'm wasting away my life, and to not feel like, what would people think of me? Like I'm the, the highlight of my day is how ahead I can get of the pickup line in the kids, school thing. Like that's the highlight of my day. I'm going like, and I'm doing all these comparisons, and I'm going, what am I comparing the right things? Am I valuing the right things? Like, yeah, so there was a lot of, I don't want to say deconstruction. I think it was a reconstruction process of just where am I building my life in the way that I should be building it? I don't think there were a lot of things off, but somehow or the other, I think there were a few areas where I was distracted. And I came face to face with some hard questions that I needed to find answers to.
You're talking about like building your life and figuring all this stuff out, and even mentioning like a couple years of just kind of like, I don't know. But the interesting thing is you're doing that with a huge spotlight. Like you're kind of, to some extent, doing all of that in front of everyone else because of the role that you had at Life.Church. You've got a huge following, a lot of people who know about you and know who you are or feel like they know you, you know? And then on top of that, just the world we live in with social media and all that sort of stuff. So what was that like? And maybe that's still to some extent still happening, but what is that like trying to figure out, like, where is my identity? What am I building? But doing it in front of people.
Yeah. And I think,
asking for a friend
with great intention, people to be encouraging when I would say, hey, I'm transitioning off the team. I don't know if you heard or not. Like just, when I was leaving the team, I was talking to teammates and stuff like that. And I would hear this thread of like, oh my gosh, like, man, if God's asking you to step out in faith, can't imagine what it could be. Cause like what you're doing here is already like at this global scale, like it's going to be even more. And I'm like,
the universe.
Oh God, I hope it is. Cause what would, and it was all like, what would everyone else think? And I don't know. I think even the way we would look at more and how we would define impact and how we would define influence, I think has been another thing that I've been really just trying to figure out more. Cause I won't speak for anybody else, but I know there are seasons where I have compared a stage and thought that is more of an influence rather than a pastor, in some field somewhere teaching a couple of students under a tree as less influential. But who am I to say that one is more influential and one is not, And so I think even rewriting the definitions, I don't think I've gotten there because there's still some things that I just automatically get drawn to. And I wish I had those opportunities. But to say that God views that as one is more important than the other, it feels like basic stuff, but it's not that basic. I think it's just that sometimes our hearts can be pulled in that direction. Fun story. My initials are AVG, so it's average. And so it's a cool way for God, I think, to just, make sure it's right in front of me, bro. Don't think too highly of yourself. You're right there along with the rest of us. And so I think it's been a cool process. Just to learn like what are those tensions that I put on my life, and I'm not over it. I think I'm still drawn to, man, I wish I could do this. I will tell you this. I think the start of this year, I felt like, so the first 2 years, God was like really kind. I felt like I was in the nest. I didn't have to do a whole lot of sales. The clients were coming. And I thought that was how normal businesses were. I was like, what are you guys talking about? Like, I think everything's great. And like, it really was. And I think the end of last year, I felt like God was telling me, hey, I'm getting ready to kick you out of the nest. And so the start of this year, it's been more like, oh crap, I'm falling out of the nest. Like, what do I do? And so I think the 2 years helped me just create a healthier foundation to where I can now get back into promoting myself and talking about it, but within the right context and right framework and right foundation. So yeah, I don't know if I answered your question, Aaron, but that's where my mind went.
You did, and more. I'm taking a lot of mental notes. Again, for friends, none of this is relevant to me at all. So that's just for like the two people who are listening who might know you and I and our connection. They can laugh about that. Everyone else is like, what?
Huh? I think, Alan, even the more lens of more, I think is very applicable, right? You know, knowing that our target audience is Oklahoma City small business owners or leaders of small businesses who desire to integrate their Christian faith, there can be a tendency that success is scale and growth, even in business, when the reality is a small business in a clearly a small defined geography that is profitable and healthy and serving its clients and community. There's no reason that isn't as impactful for the kingdom as opposed to one that is scaling and becomes global or goes all over. And I think naturally, especially certain personality profiles and certain of us who, are drivers, pioneers, activators, like we always think more must be better. When the reality is, I don't think that's how it functions in God's kingdom. And so if we're going to put that lens of our business is serving in God's kingdom and we're integrating our faith into our businesses, more doesn't always mean better. And faithfulness.
And that drive that's in us, I think I had to it was like a little bit of a pendulum thing for me, but it was like initially I thought, man, maybe this drive is bad. And I don't think the drive is bad. I think God created us all the way he created us. And if he's created us with a drive for results, it's making sure that it's not corrupted and you're not running after your shadow mission, but you're running on purpose and using that drive to pull the right things out of you and create the impact that God's created you to impact. So I had to, because I have friends that are highly driven people. They've got, challenging roles and they're in the business space. And it would not serve them well if we tell them like, hey, this drive that you have for results and success and all of that, that's a bad thing. Like you need to just calm it down. No, like go. Yeah. But I think, are you working? I don't know. An example could be, are you working 80-hour weeks or are you so this was one of the things that I had to wrestle with. Jesus says, I'm the vine, you are the branch. If we are the branches, well, then there's nothing that I'm doing that can produce fruit. All that I do that produces fruit is staying connected to the vine. If that is the case, then how does that work within this business space? Or even for me now with this consulting thing that I'm doing, can I past my 40 hours, I can text one more person, I can email one more person. And there's that temptation to say, hey kids, I'll be right there. Let me just send these 5 things out. And that's something I wrestle with. Or can I say, you know what, God, here's the bread and fish, like the story in the Bible, the little boy, this is all I have. And this is all I've got. And I'm giving you this and I'm turning my computer off. And I'm just going to trust that you're going to do more with it than I could do in the extra 10, 15 minutes that I'm stealing away from my family or from time that I need to be spending with you. So I think that was where I needed to check myself of, do I have the right boundaries, not just so I can have a healthy lifestyle, but to where I believe that God is the one in control. I have this screensaver on my phone. It's from AA. They have, 12 steps, Alcoholics Anonymous. The first 3, I think the way they summarize it is, I can't, he can, as in God can, I think I'll let him.
Yep.
That is so counter to how I'm wired. It's, I can't. My philosophy would be, I can't, I'm going to figure out how I can. And then we're just, you and me, God, we're going to do it together. Or it's like,
I'll invite you, God. You can come along with me.
Yeah.
Just stay with me now. Don't fall back. Like you got to match my pace. Like,
you got to match
that's the philosophy. Like that's how I naturally drift towards. Or very popular saying everyone talks about is, you got to, pray like it depends on God and work like it depends on you. I just wrestle with that because why can't we pray and work like it depends on God instead of it depending on us? So those were some of the resets that I needed in my heart of going, I'm going to work when I need to work, but I'm not going to let the pressure of results just overcome my mind. Where is trust if I'm not willing to shut that computer down and say, God, I'm trusting you with what I got.
Dang. That's good.
This is like what I would love to be doing. It's not a perfect day every day.
We are communicating our journey of what we're trying, of what we're learning. And I if you'll let me continue that John 15 vein, Alan, and what we're talking about here, where you were talking about connected to the, the vines being connected, the branches being connected to the vine. One of the other lessons that God has been teaching me in the last season, which is longer than maybe my flesh sometimes wants. And maybe that's because I haven't learned the lesson yet. I don't know. But is the idea that same truth from his word, branches will be cut back either way, right? If they're not producing fruit, they're cut off to be thrown and burned in the fire. If they are producing fruit, they're cut back. So either way, there's cutting, which is painful and hurts, right? Which is a step backwards, feels like. And then the ones that are producing fruit are cut back to produce more fruit. Yeah. And that just, again, weaving with our more conversation a minute ago, that does not mean more resource or winning or exposure or impact. What that fruit actually, and for the record, I wish it was. Like, I wish it was. Like, okay, cool, God, like, I'm being faithful. You're cutting me back. Come on, there's more, right? There's more. That fruit is the fruit of the Spirit, right? It's tying directly to Galatians 5:20. So it's going to be more of the character of Christ. And it's like, back to your Dallas Willard quote, like, just leaving it all, like, it's who I am becoming. And if I'm losing myself to be more like him, like, that's the actual reconstruction. I like the way you said that. That's the reconstruction of ourself over and over until we go home, until we die from earth. Like, that's the process. And so I just think that was I thought it was a beautiful reference that you made that actually kind of ties a lot of the themes that we've been processing through right there.
I might take us to this might get too personal, so feel free to draw the line wherever. But in the vein of reconstruction, and Alan, you've talked a lot about kind of reframing your thoughts on different things. And even I appreciate your transparency just to share that, like, you're continuing to learn things. Like, I feel like it's oftentimes we think about like, we should have had this all figured out when we were like 20, and it's like, I'm just a few years past 20. Some of you may be further along than me. I'm just barely past 20.
Stop it.
But
Stop it.
Make sure that I look really young in this. Is there like a filter for that? Anyway, so in this, like, all this transition that you've made, and having been in the role that you were, on the stage that you were, and being part of the capital C church in the way that you were, and now transitioning to a different stage, a different season, things like that. Can you share your perspective of the church, how that maybe has changed, or your perspective of God, how maybe that has changed since you've made that switch, that transition in your life?
Yeah, that I love that question, because that was actually one of the highlights of the season. I think, like I mentioned, my personality type, ESTJ, it's just like, when I see one way that I think works, it's very easy for me to say, well, then that's the best way. Everybody needs to do it this way. If you're not doing it this way, you're missing out. Why would you want to miss out? You could have the exact same results because this is what, it's just like very concrete thinking, which in some instances are great, in some instances are not. And so one of the really just highlights was I have walked into churches that are, in whatever definition, in their own definition, and I would agree, are doing well, that do it completely opposite from how I am used to doing church. And if they were to have asked me my advice before I stepped into their building, I would have told them, this strategy that you have is the dumbest strategy I've heard in my life. You should probably not go that route. And time again, I'm telling you, it's like I walk in, I'm going like, this is working and this is different. Wow. Okay. And there are leadership meetings that I sat in that, whether it's the denomination or whatever, like, you have one expectation when you walk in, and they just rewrite the script. And
come on.
I've met God in some of these boardrooms or these meeting rooms where I never thought that would be where the conversation went. And it's like, what are you doing, God? And it's all of a sudden, it's like this opportunity to peek at the horizon and see how he's working across multiple churches, and that he is beyond what any one of us can understand.
Come on.
And I think the strategies are great and all of that's great. So that's the highlight. The tension for me internally is, how do you now figure out, like, what is a good way what's a good strategy? It's like, well, just take some paint and throw it at the board and figure out, like, you can't do that. So there's obviously not that, but how do we bring this balance of being sensitive to his voice, but also bringing strategy and submitting it to him and not being overcome by the numbers, but still numbers have a seat at the table. Like all of these things, like it's kind of like just colliding. So that's been really cool to see how there are multiple ways of doing church and approaching ministries. And so I that's been like something I really enjoy. It's taken me out of my comfort zone, but in a good way.
Yeah. I appreciate your answer and thought it was really good, but can I poke and prod for like a little bit more of like on a personal level for you, as a husband, as a dad, just as a follower of Jesus, what toll has that taken, that transition, or what joy have you found in taking a step back? I don't really want to say taking a step back. That feels like it has a negative connotation, but making a transition and seeing things through a different lens.
So I think one of the blessings, though, in my previous role, what people don't understand is like when you're at a church and you're at a physical location and you're on a stage, I'm sure none of you guys know what I'm talking about, but when you're on a stage and, especially in our context, it's like campus pastor comes on right after music. The atmosphere is electrifying. There are people, there's eyes on you. Their eyes are on you. There's energy in the room. Like that's what you would experience. That's one moment that a campus pastor or a pastor experiences in a physical building. Let me paint you my world. I get out of my office and my filmmaker will say, hey, we're going down here. And we walk through this corridor and it's like everyone says hi. And you walk into this little studio and it's dead silent and he's setting up and he's like, you sit there. And I'm sitting there and I'm waiting. And he says, all right, cameras, lights, mic. All right, 3, 2, 1, go. And then I have to talk to a camera lens. And so I did that for 10 years. And so I think what people don't realize, like people may have seen me, but I don't see anybody. And so I think in a way it was cool that God was kind of protecting me from, though not that I would have messed up if I was, but in a way it was like, I knew the reach, but I didn't know the level of influence I had. And so in a way that was kind of cool. So when I left, like that aspect was not that much of a miss, because when I transitioned, I still for the most part was active on camera and I was still doing stuff with filming and all that. So that felt like home. I think the aspects that I did miss was being part of a team, being part of a mission that was like crystal clear. I knew exactly what I was supposed to do, where I was supposed to go. And then transitioning out of that, it's like, I'm just like La La Land. Like, so the uncertainty there and just the mood swings of like, your high days are high and your low days are really low. And so I think what I had to find out, what I had to learn like later on was, I've always been around this whole habits and practices and disciplines and all that stuff. I think these couple of years where I started seeing the fruit of it, because those highs were really high and lows were really low because I didn't have consistent things that I was doing every day. They were like hit or miss. And so fine tuning those have helped. Example would be, I got no calls scheduled for today, and no calls means no opportunities for working with someone, which means no money coming in, which means we're going to struggle for food. Like that's where my mind goes. And then it's like, okay, this day sucks. I'm going to go to Andy's and freaking just pig out on ice cream and, all of that stuff. And then it's like, I'll call Meryl and say, today was horrible, and just kind of emotionally blackmail her to where she would give in so that we'll eat out. And it's like, and then I feel worse because I'm trying to work out. And it's like, why am I working out? Like, who cares? Like, so like my mind is just like, it just kind of spirals, but then if it's a great day, it's like, oh my gosh, like, and so just learning to taper that and how that's not the best environment for my family, not the best environment for me. That was a learning process.
That's really, really good.
And I will say, like, 6 months after I transitioned from my role, my body it took 6 months for my body to get used to the new routine. I had a hard time. I was not stressed out. Like, I had nothing to do. I had no job. So, like, it was not a matter of like stressed out. Financially, we were in a decent place, thank God. And so there was no like, oh my gosh, I need to find a job right now. So there was no like outward stress, but just the toll my body had taken and the pace that I was running, I didn't realize that until I left. And when I left, you think it's normal. Like, I think that's the thing that's shocking. If somebody would have told me, and people have told me like, hey, the pace that you run, it's not normal. I was like, you don't know what you're talking about.
You're like, that's Tuesday. Normal. That's just Tuesday. Like, what are you talking about?
Yeah. Like, what are you doing? Like, you know, what are you doing with your life? But then when you get off and you begin to step into what seems like a normal pace, like my body could not handle it. And I was losing weight. That was the one good thing that came out of it. And then, but I couldn't fall asleep. And it's just like, it took 6 months for my body to just become normal. And so now when I look at people who are running at that pace, it's like, guys, like, this is a train wreck just waiting to happen. But it's hard for someone to believe you unless they're actually experiencing it. So I went so many places with that question, Erin.
No, that's good, because even in the business world, I think, especially small business, our audience and entrepreneurs, what you described of like the highs are high and the lows are low, man, that's brutally real. I feel like I say that from watching others more so than living it, but like Clay as an entrepreneur, as a small business owner, I don't want to speak for him, but I think a lot of us could resonate with that.
Well, and on a personal level, if we're getting really personal, my mom had a stroke 5 years ago, and we brought her from India to the US. And so she's in Tulsa. She's not a US citizen, so we're paying for all of her expenses out of pocket. She's paralyzed on her right side completely. She needs help 24/7. And so there's not just the pressure of like I got to make sure we're taking care of our family, but it's like, God, you told me, like, I had a good paying job. Like every 2 weeks, there was a paycheck showing up in my account. I trusted you. Like, what, do you know what you're like? Hello, come on. But just like, this is my stepping into my third year. It's worked. Like, I'm not saying that everything was like always great. Like, there were some stressful times and there were some numbers that were more in the red than they were in the green, but I had nothing else to hold on to except his word. And you told me to take this step of faith. So I'm trusting you, and I'm just going to hang in there as long as I can and be smart about it and make sure I'm doing my budget. And even like practically going from getting paid consistently at a particular time to like, as a small business owner, it's like some months are great, some months are not. And it's like, how do you make sure you plan it? Like, that's all new for me. So yeah, it's been just one giant learning experience.
Clay, small business owner, can you relate at all?
Yes. Yeah, yes. Everything he said. Yes. Yeah. And I'm nearly a decade in at this point. And yes, it's still the same journey, because there's seasons where maybe you perceive it's more comfortable, there's more money in the bank, but you just, I guess we can literally say we've lived through like a worldwide pandemic, and you never know what's going to come and happen to your small business. And the VUCA, again, a term you're going to be familiar with. Yes. And then, like, that's real, right? The volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity, and the pace at which it's happening to every business, every small business. It is a journey, and it is volatile. Yep. And Alan, I want to praise you. And again, you'll be familiar with this phrase. Thank you for your courageous authenticity. Like, just in that last, 7, 8, 10 minutes, where Erin was asking those questions, and then she, leveraged her good skill and asked a follow-up, probed a little bit more. But man, you just, like, you shared right there. And I just mean, like, you risked to be authentic with me, with our listeners. And thank you for doing that. 'Cause we believe that's one of the principles to build an integrated business. Like, we believe that's one of the very fundamental ways to bring your Christian faith into the business is to be courageously authentic. to bring your made in the image of God's self, all of it, the mess, the challenge, the personal family dynamics, the financial, the everything. And so thanks for graciously sharing that with all of us.
Mm-hmm.
You guys might have heard about this. This was like kind of new for me, in that same vein of authenticity, like vulnerability. I always imagined, like, if you want to call it strength and weakness, I always imagined it on the same line. So it's either strength or the other extreme is weakness. And it was a friend that talked about, I forgot who did this study, but they're not actually on the same line. So if you take, instead of strength, if you were to call it like a person, like in your role, there's this high authority space, or there's vulnerability. It's not on the same line. It's actually two different axes. So there's a way that you can be highly authoritative, but you can also be highly vulnerable. So if it's like I don't know my graphs that well, but like x-axis, y-axis, and you've got high authority, low authority, you've got high vulnerability, low vulnerability. You can be in that top right quadrant where it's you're highly you've got that high authority position where it can be perceived as strength, but vulnerability is not the opposite of that. It's actually a quality that can come alongside that quality, and it can be one that's together. Or it's high, like high vulnerability and low authority is not where you want to go, and you kind of play all those three quadrants. And so it redefined how I viewed strength and weakness, and separated them instead of putting them on the same line. And so that's where, for me, authenticity comes. It's like, I can be a leader that can lead well, but I can still, or lead strong, or lead with confidence or boldness, or whatever, however you want to describe that. But I can also be authentic and vulnerable and not view that as the opposite of what I'm trying to accomplish.
I like that visual.
That is good. That is good. Alan, maybe speak for a second. If there's someone listening, someone in our audience, somebody watching, who maybe is feeling similar prompts. Like you talked about, it wasn't an audible word of God, but they are feeling prompts about, man, it might be time to leave my current job. It might be time to leave my current role at a church. Maybe it's time for me to go out on my own, but I actually can't see what the other step is. So in other words, I feel a prompt to take a step of obedience that's moving away from something without clarity of where to move to. Just speak to them for a minute. Maybe give them counsel, maybe give them your experience as to a few years down the road from that moment.
Sure. Obviously different circumstances are different, and it's hard to, kind of give like blanket statement. I can tell you my personal journey when I was faced with that. If you would have asked me at that point when I felt like it was time for me to leave, I don't know if I would have described what I was feeling in this way, but hindsight 2020, I think in my mind, the reason I was nervous to leave was because I felt like if I leave where I'm at, I'm going to miss out on God's best for me. And in a way, I thought, and again, I couldn't have articulated it at that time, but looking back, the only way I would have thought that I would be missing out on God's best is if I would think God's limited to where I'm at. And if I step out of this bubble that he's in, then I'm going to miss out on what he has. And I had to pop that bubble and realize that God's way bigger than that. And in fact, that one career decision that I'm making is really just going back to the most important thing that God gets out of your life. Like when you look at that, when you look at your entire life and you look at this one decision, I don't think it weighs as much as we think it weighs. And it's hard to see that in the moment. It was when I was getting ready to leave that I met a few other people, like even our mutual friend, Kevin Penry, like just looking at his life and looking through the number of roles that he's been in and the different careers that the dude's an architect, a pilot, he was a pastor. I mean, it's like you did all of this in one life. It's realizing that there might be more things that God wants to get out of my life than what I initially thought of. It reminds me of this. Sorry, a little bit of a rabbit trail. But when Jesus came, obviously the people, the Jews were hoping to see a physical kingdom being manifested. Yeah. And here comes Jesus saying, you know, the kingdom of God is near, or the kingdom of God is here. And in their mind, they're going, I know what he wants to do. This is exactly what he wants to do. Mm-hmm. And even all the way to the last moment, they're like, hey, so is this the time? Is this the time? Is this it? And Jesus was like, no, it's not this. It's like something completely different. It didn't look like anything they imagined. And so when I think about Ephesians 3:20 and we talk about like God can do immeasurably more, we sometimes think, okay, I've got this picture and God can do immeasurably more means he's not going to do this, he's going to do this. And it's like, no, this is the wrong picture. Yeah. Like it's not what you, and so I think we spend so much time analyzing, strategizing, building our life plan and everything around this little thing, this little kingdom that we think needs to be what it needs to look like. And God's like saying, no, guys, can you just trust me on this and just trust me. And so for me, the biggest lesson was realizing that God is not confined to this little bubble that I created and expected him to live in. He is way beyond that. And so if you're feeling an urge, obviously, like others have probably told you, you know, it's important to have right counsel and all of that. I think just for me, that was the main thing. And one of the leaders at Life.Church, like I'll never forget the advice he gave me. Sam Roberts, I talked to him and I said, like, we're having coffee and I said, all right, like one of my questions was like, Sam, what if I'm making the wrong decision? And he told me something that I'd never forget. He said, Alan, he thought for a second and he was like, when we are following Christ and we are doing the best we can, living according to his will, and we make a decision, I don't see it as a right or wrong decision. I see it as a right or redeemable decision. And if it's right, it's right. If it's not, we've got to trust that God's big enough to redeem that situation for us. And that just took the pressure off of me, because now I felt like, okay, this decision is not on my shoulder. God, I'm trusting you with it. And I've collected as much information. I've done all the spreadsheets. I've visualized my data and my future and all of that. And based on everything I know, I think this is the right decision that I need to make. And I'm going to step out knowing well that you are big enough to move me and redirect my path if needed. And that, I think that just freed me up to take the decision that I needed to take.
Well, thank you for sharing that to someone and even sharing it with us about the journey you went on there. To close the episode today, Alan, you know, I sent it in the outline ahead of time. I don't know if you referenced it there or not, or if God was just having fun with all of us, but we close every episode reading a verse, and the one that had stirred on me ahead of time is in Matthew, and it's Matthew 6:10, but which is, your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. And just that awareness for all of our listeners, for the three of us recording right here together, that his kingdom, right? And how do we open ourselves to that? How do we not let our definitions of what that is filter his kingdom? And so for us to open our hearts to that and be present to that, I think that is a very appropriate way to land the plane today, Alan. So thanks for joining us, man. Very much. Thank you for being here today. And listeners, until next week when we're together again, choose life. Thanks for tuning into our show. If you want to learn more about how you can integrate your faith into your business, download our integrated business guide for free by clicking the link in the show notes below. Thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you next time.